Something inexplicable is happening where almost half the population say they remember things from the past being different or changed.
The Mandela effect got its name because there was a very large segment of the population that believed that Nelson Mandela died decades earlier. Suddenly, his recent death was announced. Billions of people are interested in this topic, that memory isn't jiving up with reality.
Yes, it's like the Twilight Zone. Not everything is what you think it is.
In the car in which John F. Kennedy was assassinated, there were 6 passengers. I've watched the videos over and over. There is no way in my mind you could tell me there were 6 people in that car.
Things that people know so well just be twisted just enough to get people to question whether or not what they remembered was real.
There are many possibilities for the origins of the Mandela effect. Some people think it's a simple case of mass misremembering, but the prevailing notion involves the idea that there are other universes existing right next to ours.
Fundamental reality as we know it can change. This lines up with sciences of today. CERN is a collider where they're smashing particles. Stephen Hawking, he warned people about CERN, very adamant that this was not something that we should be doing. We could be in a simulation. We don't know who is in charge. It could be aliens. It could be angels or demons, some people say. It could be just artificial intelligence.
The nightmare scenarios that could stem from that are just limitless.
Now, a growing number of people want to know if history is being edited.
Hello, everyone. My name is Heather Hurt with the NRW, where nerds rule the world. And I am here with Robert. Is it Kiviat? It's Kiviat, right?
Close enough. Kiviat. That's
Kiviat.
fine.
Okay. I apologize.
Good job.
Thank you. Who directed and did the research for the upcoming documentary, The Mandela Effect Phenomenon, which you have so perfectly behind you, which comes to digital on July 9th. How are you today, sir?
Oh, I'm great. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to ask some pretty hard questions here today because I really want.
I'm ready for you. Don't worry.
Okay. Let's start with the easiest one of all. Why the Mandela effect?
Well, if anybody researched my background and my career, I'm pretty well known for doing some really big mysteries for the major broadcast networks and even NBC Universal, Sci-Fi Channel, even cable. And Netflix has aired put a lot of my shows on as well. So basically what I'm known for doing are big mysteries that people care a lot about. This particular one I cared so much about because it crossed into my life. I just noticed there were changes in my history. I remember certain direct things that were not the way they are now. And I looked into it and I found out there's something called the Mandela effect. Not only do millions of people believe something has changed in our society, in our basic reality, but I believe it's billions of people. I think TikTok, YouTube, and the global landscape has shown this is a global phenomenon. It's not misremembering. It's not some kind of psychological mumbo jumbo. There's many examples that I believe as a prosecutor in a courtroom, as a journalist, which I am, I could prove something has happened. What has happened? Hard to say exactly what caused it, but there are some examples that cannot be denied. They're not misrememberings. The factual evidence is there. We call it residual evidence. People will see the evidence in our documentary.
Okay. And let's talk about that evidence a little bit. Coming from a documentarian's point of view, and I've asked this from a couple. Do you think personal bias ever interferes with our research when you're looking into stuff? Could your personal biases towards the Mandela effect led to some of the things that you show in your documentary?
There's no doubt any journalist out there who claims that their own personal biases don't come into their reporting, it's nonsense. But the personal bias has to be well researched, has to be cross-checked, just like a prosecuting attorney or a defense attorney making their case. They have to make sure their ducks are in a row, everything is as clear as can be. And if it doesn't hold up, the jury or the judge is going to throw it out. So I guess your personal biases may lead you to where you're going to go, but eventually you better get your helmet on. You better make sure you know what you're doing. So I think overall, if you approach it like a journalist, and I wrote for science magazines. It's not like I'm, coming at this like a paranormal producer. I find that term egregious, actually. Paranormal TV, it doesn't even exist. Paranormal is just it's a word. It doesn't mean much, So I think when you look at the mystery of the Mandela effect, and I've done many on television, UFOs, ghosts, you name the paranormal mystery or alleged paranormal mystery, I look at the evidence. If there's no evidence, I wouldn't touch it. If there was no evidence that my own personal bias wasn't supported by hard evidence that you can't deny, I wouldn't touch it.
Understood. What are you really hoping that the audience takes away, other than your, your feelings, other than the feelings of those, because there was some very strong feelings from those that you brought on into the documentary.
Yeah.
What are you hoping that the audience truly takes away from this?
Just like a jury, I'm looking at the entire people, call it millions and millions of people, hopefully, that watch our movie. They're the audience, but they're also the jury. And I want to make sure I brought two people, not a bevy of people. I brought two stellar witnesses that make the case that there is no doubt something that has physically occurred. It's not just a misremembering. There's something that changed social, we'll call them just like really cultural icons, cultural things, touchstones that can't be like just forgetting, you forgot something, such as biblical verses, names of celebrities, product names, scenes in movies, and we can get into some of them. Some of them are so clearly evidentiary, these Mandela effects, that someone needs to explain what happened. And we went to some of the people behind some of these things, like let's say the show Sex in the City. I'm from New York originally. Sex in the City was the name of this television show. The movie, Sex in the City. There's now Sex and the City. You can go and see all the residual evidence we show in our documentary that sometime in our past, very recently, we had Sex in the City. That was the name of the show. Now, I did not make the contacts, but some people have contacted the people behind Sex in the City. And apparently they are sticking to, of course, the movie is called, and the TV show, Sex and the City. But they're acting a little bit defensive. So from what I'm hearing, there's a lot of strange feelings about it, because you can go on the internet and you can see all the different products out there that have been Sex in the City. These are merchandising, obviously, platforms, merchandising. So why would there be Sex in the City merchandise if the name of the movie or TV show was called Sex and the City? And then ironically, you have another example, which we want to point to, which more so in, after the movie is seen by many people, we want people to do something. Go to the Lucas Films, find out where they sell their figurines. There's a little figurine, and you press it or press the button, you pull the string or press the button, and the little figurine goes, "Luke, I am your father." Why would the company behind the movie make a mistake? If you go watch the movie now, Empire Strikes Back, you're going to see Darth Vader, played by James Earl Jones, say, "No, I am your father." Like out of nowhere. It doesn't even make any sense. And that is backed up by the Mandela effect version of that, of course, is that it was always, "Luke, I am your father." James Earl Jones, the actor, has gone public, and you'll see it in our movie. He only remembers his line as, "Luke, I am your father." He knows it is that. So we show him walking around the set of 2.5 Men. This is a CBS comedy. And he's brought on to be kind of playing himself. He's going to do a voicemail for somebody in the show. And he's walking with the character, and he says, "So what do you want? Luke, I am your father, or this is CNN?" So we all know he does this to CNN, but he also said, "Luke, I am your father." And he even is seen in our movie talking about the script itself. And he says, when I read the line, and Luke, I am your father, I wondered, how are they going to play that off? How are they going to tell that story? Pretty amazing evidence. You can't deny it. It's pretty shocking.
There's definitely some interesting takes on it. And what that brings up is the concept of the zeitgeist. There are many people just, in both sides of the field, that some of these concepts are brought up as mass media presumptions within the zeitgeist. How is your response to, let's use the line of "life was a box of chocolates"? That's something that both of your guests did bring up. as they remember it as Forrest himself saying life is like a box of chocolates.
It's one of the biggest ones there is. And almost there's probably 50% of the population, at least 50%, are adamant. He was sitting on the bench and said, my mom always said life is like a box of chocolate. So we now know evidence is there of David Letterman, and you'll see it in our movie, as you probably know already. David Letterman at the Academy Awards in the mid-90s says, it's always great when writers write, I'm paraphrasing here, writers write great lines like, life is like a box of chocolate. Now, Tom Hanks is also, we didn't put it in our movie because it would be a little difficult to kind of put it in, but in another screen, let's call it like a rehearsal, we have evidence that at one time they were rehearsing it where he said, life is like a box of chocolate. Now that brings up a really interesting point. Is the Mandela effect actually what some people believe, that two different timelines, two different realities sort of merge together a little bit? There's like residual, touching of the two different timelines, and a creative idea that was just an idea in one universe was used in this universe. So in other words, maybe there's another timeline right next to ours. And in that other timeline, the movie director and the people behind the movie went with him sitting on the bench going, life is like a box of chocolate. But in our timeline, presently where we are right now, it's life was like a box of chocolate. But David Letterman is clearly showing that there's evidence from whichever timeline, he remembers it clearly. Life is like a box of chocolate. And in the same Academy Awards, he's saying movies like Interview with a Vampire, Interview with a Vampire, not the Vampire. Now, look, David Letterman is not going to make that mistake in front of the entire world at the Academy Awards. 100 million people watching, newspaper writers the next day would have been all over this. David Letterman doesn't even know the name of the movie called Interview with the Vampire. Now, by the way, let's not even get into the writing of the vampire, because the vampire doesn't even make much sense, because vampires would be probably more than one if there's vampires. So it's just a crazy, crazy thing. And we have this evidence in the Academy Awards, and people need to see this.
Yes. And that was kind of why I wanted to bring up where the zeitgeist becomes that mass media assumption. And it becomes part of the zeitgeist. That Luke, I am your father is such a big one, right? And you really, I could feel your frustration when you were narrating that part of the documentary. How much do you think could the Mandela effect be possibly due to us making presumptions based off of what is assumed from the zeitgeist?
There's a lot of that. There's no doubt mixed into the Mandela effect, just like in the UFO mysteries. We recently had it happen the last 6 years, the complete baloney going on Capitol Hill with a bunch of people making a hay out of UFO evidence. That's not the greatest evidence ever, just to kind of make money and get themselves going in the cultural landscape, or zeitgeist, like you say. The zeitgeist about the Mandela effect, I'm sure, is filled with a lot of misremembering. That's fine. That's not what we're talking about here, though. You have to separate the wheat from the chaff, I believe Carl Sagan said years ago, and the famous astrophysicist. And that is probably what we're looking at here. There are many Mandela effects that you can explain away as zeitgeist misremembering, but there's many that we show in our movie, and we're very careful about that. Remember, we've got an hour and a half or so, under 2 hours, to tell the public what we believe, like a prosecuting attorney. So we're not going to sit there and play around with a lot of misremembering. We got rid of the misrememberings. We made sure we didn't focus on misrememberings. We're focusing on evidentiary Mandela effects, things that clearly have a level of evidence that you could present to a courtroom. And we're not even talking about circumstantial evidence. We're talking about serious, real evidence that's very hard to explain. I actually thought initially with this movie, and we might do a part 2 on this one, where we literally go to the creators of these movies and we sit down with Kevin Costner and say, Kevin, how was it in Field of Dreams? You're at the beginning of the movie, you play this character, Ray, and you're in the field and the voice comes in and it says, if you build it, he will come. He? Who is he, first of all? Is it God? Is it the Father that comes at the end of the movie? Is that what you were trying to come up with? And basically, why do you say everyone remembers, if you build it, they will come? Who are you quoting there? I want to ask him. Now, you'll see in our movie, Kevin Costner saying without a doubt, America and the world basically has embraced, if you build it, they will come. There's no he. You're not going to find any memes out there going, if you build it, he will come. You can find a plethora of memes out there from the time of 2015, 16, 17, that all you really see is, if you build it, they will come. So what's going on here?
I'm sorry. Someone came to say hi. I apologize.
It's okay. Huh?
Let's kind of shift the conversation a little bit. You gave in your documentary a couple of different reasons for the Mandela effect. One of the big ones being, being the CERN generator, being the CERN. It's just really the statement I should have said. What is your favorite? Like, if you could just pick, what would and it was all 100% true, no matter what. What would be your favorite cause for the Mandela effect?
I don't want to go and say it's a cause. I think the leading candidate, the leading probable evidence shows CERN in Switzerland, combined with the development of the quantum computer and the experiments that they've done in both sectors here, show that there appears to be a causal effect from the beginnings of the particle collider powering up. You had guys like Stephen Hawking before he died. You had major publications like the Wall Street Journal writing headlines. CERN may open portals to hell. I'm not joking. Now, we're not talking about some paranormal, some kind of, rinky-dink publication. We're talking about the Wall Street Journal. And they felt it because they had heard from the scientists at CERN. They were concerned they would open portals to hell. They were concerned they would create a fabric change in our society. Now, we've not looked into this enough because we just found out about it. But apparently, when CERN did one of their power-ups, they affected the actual ability for the sun to affect the earth in different ways. The gravitational effects of the earth were affected. Now, I'm a journalist and I'm never going to talk about something glibly, but there's something going on here where the Mandela effect could easily be caused by CERN, quantum physics, and we believe even Elon Musk has pointed out the proof of the simulation idea, which we'll talk about as the next theory, overlaps very much with the Mandela effect. So what we're talking about here is two different ideas. CERN doing their particle collisions, an electron is affected that causes a change in our reality in ways that we can't even fathom at a very tiny particle level. It's so hard to understand, but people need to understand something called the double slit test about quantum physics. And it's so mind-blowing that it really speaks to two things. One, Elon Musk claims that we may be living in a simulation. In fact, he believes that we are living in a simulation like trillion to one. Now, if we're living in a simulation, what evidence is there that would happen? Well, a lot of people that go on shows like Joe Rogan and other shows basically come on and talking about physics, and they point to the idea of simulation, and they mention the Mandela effect by rote. The Mandela effect seems to be everybody's like go-to evidence for the simulation theory. We can get into that more. But see, why I mentioned the double slit test in quantum physics is it shows that when you are focusing on a beam of light, let's say, and you measure it, the light seems to know and becomes a particle. And then when you're not looking at it and it knows you're not looking at it, it stays a wave. That looks like we create a reality. We create something. So maybe we are working in some way with a phenomena we're not really clear about, But one thing is pretty sure. Quantum physics and the particle collisions that are going on at CERN and the quantum computer, as we point out in our movie, they're the best candidates right now. Regarding the simulation theory, I'm not quite a believer in the simulation theory, but I got to tell you, the quantum physics experiments I just told you about in a double slit test sure gives a lot of possibilities for living in a simulation. Because simulation indicates that you could be you're living in a computer kind of program, right? So let's say you're you're playing your computer game tomorrow, and in the game, your character, whoever your avatar, whatever, is walking up toward a building. As you walk up to the building itself, it's not giving you all the details of the building. Only when you get really, really close do you see the windows, the signs on the building, whatever. So in many ways, quantum physics is telling us that we don't see things until we focus on them, or we don't know they're real until we focus on them. So what's really going on here? So we get into a lot of this in the movie, but overall, I don't want to blow people's minds. The movie's very focused on what evidence is there that actual things have been changed. Now, is it possible someone's, we're in a computer game and someone's changing these things, like the programmer? I don't know. Is it God? Maybe God's affecting our world, and forget about the simulation. It's God. Is it possibly humans from the future coming back and changing things because they want to see how they could change history? A lot of theories are up there. Time travel is a part of it. It's a great kind of mind-bending kind of mystery, the Mandela effect phenomenon. It really is.
Absolutely. Thank you, Robert, so much for your time. The Mandela effect phenomenon arrives on digital on July 9th,
July 9th.
Thank you so much, sir. And have a wonderful day.
Thank you.